There are some books that teach, some that inspire, and a few that hide. For millennia, the Bible has been read, revered, quoted, memorized, and even weaponized, from dusty pulpits in forgotten churches to political podiums of great power. Its words have echoed through generations. It has been called the Word of God, the Book of Life, the moral compass of mankind. But what if it is something more? What if it is a code book? In the quiet of night, under dim candlelight, ancient scribes copied line by line, word by word, often unaware that hidden within the very sentences they transcribed were patterns, symbols, and mathematical architectures far beyond human coincidence. Patterns that whispered, patterns that spoke not just to the people of the past, but to you. Here and now, this is not a conspiracy, nor is it mere numerology. This is a story about layers, of meaning, of language, of time. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd stumbled upon the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran. The world gasped, hidden for almost 2,000 years. These ancient manuscripts weren't just copies of known scriptures. Some contained variant texts, unfamiliar prophecies, and references that made even the most seasoned theologians scratch their heads. Then came the Bible code movement in the 1990s, suggesting encrypted prophecies embedded through equidistant letter sequences. Dismissed by many, obsessively studied by others, but long before codes were searched by computer programs and modern scholars. The ancients already knew. Rabbis spoke of layers in the Torah, the Peshet, literal. The Remez, hinted, the Derash, interpreted, and the Sod, secret, mystical. This wasn't new, it was just forgotten. So the question is not, is there a code? The question is, are you ready to read it? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The Bible is not just a book. It is a map, a mirror, and for those who dare to dig deeper, a manual. A manual for life, for leadership, for influence, for wealth, for war, for inner peace. In this journey, we will walk side by side through the ancient texts, not just reading the words, but listening to the space between them. We will dive into gematria, uncover the meaning behind names, numbers, and symbols, and learn how these covert codes have shaped empires, guided kings, and even whispered secrets to the modern entrepreneur. This is not theology, this is revelation. Let us begin. The architecture of the divine. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. These are the first words of Genesis. Most readers pass by them quickly, familiar with the phrase, unaware that even in this single verse lies a hidden mathematical framework, a code that has fascinated Hebrew scholars, mystics, and scientists for centuries. Let us begin with the Hebrew. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim veret haaretz. 7 Hebrew words, 28 Hebrew letters. 7, the number of completion. 28, a multiple of 7. Intentional? Absolutely. Biblical Hebrew isn't just a language. It's a numeric system. Each letter carries a numerical value, and ancient scribes believed that numbers were not arbitrary but divinely appointed carriers of truth. This belief gave rise to gematria, the mystical Jewish system of assigning numerical value to a word or phrase. So let's ask, what does the Bible say in Numbers? The code of 7. The number 7 is the first great key, a number that recurs with divine insistence. 7 days of creation. The 7th day is holy. 7 trumpets. 7 seals. 7 churches in Revelation. It represents completion, perfection, divine order, not once, not twice, but hundreds of times across the Bible, across books written over a span of 1.500 years. Is it just coincidence, or is there architecture behind the authorship? Modern theologian and mathematician Dr. Ivan Panin, who devoted over 50 years to analyzing the Bible, found that the structure of many passages, especially in the original Hebrew and Greek, were mathematically perfect, based on numeric patterns of 7, 11, 13, and 37. In Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 alone, he uncovered over 30 distinct patterns revolving around the number 7. Consider this, the number of Hebrew words in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, 7. The number of letters, 28, 7 by 4. The first 3 Hebrew words contain the subject, God, and have 14 letters, 7 by 2. The last 4 Hebrew words contain the object, the heavens and the earth, and have 14 letters, again 7 by 2. The Hebrew word for the heavens and the earth each appear exactly 7 times throughout Genesis chapter 1. This goes beyond poetic symmetry, it's mathematical design, a linguistic tapestry with numeric threads woven through its very fabric. Pannon later wrote, "The Bible is not merely a book, but a building, a divine structure whose foundation is arithmetic. Beyond the 7, the geometry of words." Now step further, words are not just words, they are geometries. In Hebrew, every letter has a value, and therefore every word has a sum. This creates a numerical identity for each concept. For example, the Hebrew word for life, chai, is made of 2 letters, chet, 8, plus yod, 10, equals 18. That's why 18 is a sacred number in Jewish culture, symbolizing life and blessing. Donations are often made in multiples of 18. The word for love, ahava, equals 13. The word for one, echad, also equals 13. And what is love if not the act of becoming one? These patterns are not humanly placed. They are discovered, as though the author encoded divine fingerprints in language itself. But here's the astonishing part, these numerical patterns don't just exist in Hebrew. When you map certain values in Greek, the language of the New Testament, you find harmonies between the testaments. Coincidence? Or code? The purpose of the pattern. Why does this matter? Because meaning isn't just in what the Bible says, it's in how it says it. The repetition, the symmetry, the numeric structures, they create a kind of spiritual resonance. A code that trains the mind not just to read, but to perceive. This is no longer about religion. It's about perception design, how a document can shape the mind of a reader through structured, embedded rhythm. Just like a song can influence emotion without words, these patterns activate something deeper than logic. This is why, throughout history, kings, warriors, merchants, mystics, all turn to this book not just for morality, but for strategy, application in life and business. Let's step back. Suppose you're a business leader. What does this have to do with you? Everything. You see, divine structure teaches us principles of order, rhythm, cycle, just as the world was made in 6 days and rested on the 7th. Productivity without rhythm leads to burnout. The pattern of 6 + 1 is not just sacred, it is practical. Work 6 days, rest on 1, sow for 6 years, let the land rest on the 7th, Sabbath year, Shemitah. Plan in 7s, short-term cycles, long-term renewals. Successful businesses often run on cycles, fiscal quarters, product development sprints, sabbaticals. These weren't invented in Silicon Valley. They are ancient. And then, there's the principle of divine proportion. If your business lacks rhythm, it lacks spiritual geometry. If your life lacks structure, it lacks resonance. What if the Bible's design could help restore harmony in how we live, lead, and build? Because hidden in the text, beneath the stories and teachings, lies a deeper language, a language of code, a language of design, a language that waits, not to be preached, but to be decoded. Wisdom hidden in the lives of kings. If numbers speak, then symbols whisper. The Bible is filled with symbols, not merely literary devices, but living metaphors. They are more than storytelling tools. They are codes of consciousness, embedded in narratives, names, actions, and events. Each story, each character, serves not just a historical role, but a spiritual archetype, a blueprint for decision-making, growth, failure, and redemption. Let's begin with one of the most extraordinary, Joseph, the dreamer turned ruler. Joseph, the dreamer and the manager. The story of Joseph is often taught as a lesson in forgiveness and divine destiny. But hidden beneath the surface lies a masterclass in leadership, economic strategy, and psychological endurance. Sold into slavery by his jealous brothers, Joseph rises from prisoner to prime minister of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. His path is paved not by brute force or political manipulation, but by dream interpretation, a symbolic language he inherits from divine connection. What's the Covert code here? Joseph is a man who understands cycles. He interprets Pharaoh's dream of 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows as 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. But he doesn't stop at interpretation, he acts. He creates the first recorded instance of a national economic reserve system in history. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to collect 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 years of abundance. Genesis chapter 41 verse 34. 20% tax on abundance. Reserve strategy, crisis anticipation. Modern entrepreneurs call this hedging risk. Economists call it counter-cyclical planning. Investors call it asset diversification. But Joseph, he calls it wisdom. Key takeaway for today: don't wait for famine to build your storehouses. Predict patterns. Prepare early. Think in sevens. Joseph didn't just save Egypt. He stabilized the region, negotiated with foreign nations, and created economic influence so powerful that even his former enemies bowed before him. He didn't use a sword. He used strategy born from symbols. Solomon, the king of wisdom and wealth. If Joseph was the master of timing, then Solomon was the master of structure. Known as the wisest man who ever lived, King Solomon's life is a goldmine of leadership insights, if you read between the lines. First, consider this: Solomon builds the temple of God, the most detailed architectural plan in all of Scripture. It's no accident that the temple's dimensions, materials, and rituals are meticulously coded. 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, walls overlaid with pure gold. Why such specificity? Because the temple isn't just a building, it's a symbol of inner order. A blueprint for building yourself, your business, your legacy. The Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber, represents the core of consciousness. The place where clarity, wisdom, and divine guidance reside. Only the high priest could enter, once a year, after intense purification. In business terms, you can't access true innovation without deep internal clarity. You can't build external empires if your internal structure is chaos. Solomon's wisdom also appears in the form of proverbs, over 3,000 of them. These are compressed codes, one-liners that contain entire models of thought. Example: a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Proverbs chapter 25 verse 28. Right-pointing arrow lesson: emotional mastery is structural security. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Proverbs chapter 15 verse 22. Right-pointing arrow lesson: build advisory networks. Don't make decisions in echo chambers. Solomon didn't just build temples, he built systems of thought, structured wisdom, and encoded leadership. And through it, he built wealth beyond imagination. David, the warrior poet leader. Before Solomon, there was David, the shepherd boy who became a warrior, then king. David's life reads like an epic, full of conflict, passion, betrayal, and redemption, but it also serves as a symbolic guide to courageous leadership, emotional intelligence, and the price of purpose. One of the most iconic moments is his battle with Goliath, a teenage boy, armed not with a sword but with a sling and 5 smooth stones. Defeats a giant warrior, but the code here isn't just bravery. David chooses 5 stones, but only uses one. The Hebrew word for stone, even, is composed of 2 root words, av, father, and ben, son, a symbol of legacy. Generational strength. Goliath isn't just an enemy, he's a symbol of fear, systems of oppression, and internal doubt. David defeats Goliath not by matching his strength, but by attacking his blind spot: agility over brute force, speed over size. Leadership lesson: you don't need bigger resources. You need better strategy, sharper aim, and deep self-belief. Later, David becomes a leader of a nation, not by erasing his weaknesses, but by confronting them. His Psalms reveal a man of profound emotional depth. He is vulnerable before God, honest about his failures, and still deeply loved. This is the code of authentic leadership. True kingship doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the ability to fall, rise, and lead anyway. Symbolism as strategy. Now, pause for a moment. Why does the Bible use symbolism instead of clear instructions? Because symbols transcend time. They can't be outdated. They adapt to every culture, every context. A sword is never just a weapon. A tree is never just a plant. A name is never just a label. In the Bible, water equals cleansing, rebirth, chaos, and life. Fire equals purification, judgment, passion. Mountains equals encounter with the divine, challenge, elevation. Bread equals sustenance, teaching, body of Christ. These aren't decorations, they are codes that speak to your subconscious mind, shaping your perception of power, purpose, risk, and reward. If you can learn to read symbols, you can learn to decode reality. the hidden codes behind names and legends. There is a profound mystery in names. In the Bible, names are more than identifiers, they are prophecies, destinies, and maps of human experience. The act of naming is not merely a social custom, but a sacred event. The names given to individuals in the Bible are not just what you call someone, they are blueprints of their life's journey. The hidden patterns woven into their very identity. Take, for instance, the name Abram. When God first called Abram to leave his homeland and follow a new path, he was not just calling a man, he was calling a symbol of faith. But what is the meaning of Abram's name? It means exalted father, a man of great honor. However, when God establishes his covenant with Abram, he changes his name to Abraham, which means father of many nations. Why the change? Because names reflect purpose, and in the case of Abraham, his new name signifies not just his identity, but his future legacy, a nation that would rise from him. This is not just a simple change, it is a divine reprogramming of Abraham's destiny. He becomes more than he was, he is redefined by a name that reflects the larger narrative of his life, a life that will give birth to a multitude of nations, generations, and ultimately, a spiritual inheritance that will endure for millennia. The power of naming in business and leadership. This principle is not only theological, it is practical. In business and leadership, names and titles hold power. Think about the names of companies and the stories they tell. For example, Apple, the simple name suggests knowledge, temptation, and the potential for profound change. It was a symbol of simplicity that would lead to global transformation. The name itself became part of the brand's identity. Similarly, in leadership, how you name your mission, your vision, and even your teams is a powerful act of setting destiny. By naming, you are invoking the future potential of what your business or organization can become. Leaders who understand the power of names can shape destinies. For instance, consider the Bible's recurring use of Israel. The name Israel itself is a transformation from a name meaning one who struggles with God to the nation that prevails with God. Israel's name doesn't just tell you who they were, it tells you who they are becoming. It speaks of struggle, resilience, and ultimate triumph. Names encode potential, not just through meaning, but through the archetypes they represent. The archetype of the hero's journey. As we move through the Bible, we begin to see a repeated archetype, the hero's journey. This pattern mirrors not only the stories of kings, prophets, and leaders, but the inner journey of every individual. From Adam to David to Jesus, the Bible presents the heroic cycle, the call to adventure, the trial, the descent, the resurrection, and the return. For example, Moses is called by God to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. He is initially hesitant, but through a series of signs and miraculous events, he eventually embraces his mission. Moses represents the reluctant hero, one who is called to leadership but only rises to meet his calling after struggle. Personal growth and divine empowerment. Moses' journey is one of self-discovery and obedience to divine will. A reflection of how many leaders and entrepreneurs start out unsure of themselves, but ultimately find strength through vision and purpose. Moses, however, doesn't just struggle for himself. He struggles for others, for the liberation of a people. This too is a key lesson in leadership. True leadership requires sacrifice. It's not about personal glory, but about serving the greater good. The hero's journey can also be found in Jesus Christ, who exemplifies the ultimate archetype, the Savior. Jesus' journey is one of transformation, from humility to kingship, from suffering to resurrection. His story offers a model for leaders to embrace not only victory but suffering, as both are integral to the process of becoming. In business terms, this is the entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurs often begin their journeys full of passion and vision, but face inevitable trials, financial struggles, market challenges, personal doubts. Yet, just as Moses led Israel to freedom and Jesus redeemed humanity, entrepreneurs must emerge from struggle stronger, more resilient, and more capable of leading others to success. Symbolic names and strategic thinking. This concept of naming and archetypes extends far beyond just the characters in the Bible. Every name and event in Scripture is carefully crafted to reflect deeper meanings, codes that unlock the essence of life. Let's take the name David, meaning beloved. David's story is not only about his triumphs but also his failures. He is a king who commits adultery, experiences personal loss, and makes mistakes, yet is still regarded as a man after God's own heart. Why? Because David, like all heroes of the Bible, embodies the journey of redemption. This is where the true business insight lies. Success doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the ability to recover, to learn, and to lead from the heart. The name David symbolizes relational leadership, emotional intelligence, and the ability to connect deeply with others, even in times of failure. The archetype of the garden and the kingdom. Finally, we return to one of the most important archetypes of the Bible, the Garden of Eden. The garden represents paradise, but it also represents potential, the untouched land of opportunity and vision. When Adam and Eve are cast out, it symbolizes the loss of innocence, but also the journey into purpose. For entrepreneurs and leaders, the Garden of Eden is a symbol of the initial stages of any venture. It is a place where potential is infinite and the future is unwritten. However, just as Adam and Eve must leave the garden, so too must every entrepreneur face the reality of their business journey, the journey from vision to execution. From potential to actuality, the fall from grace is inevitable, but so is the potential for redemption, for growth, and for purpose. Conclusion: unlocking the codes within. The Bible's names, stories, and archetypes are not just relics of the past, they are living codes, designed to shape the minds and hearts of those who study them. These codes provide insights into human nature, leadership, strategy, and personal growth. By understanding these symbols, names, and archetypes, we can begin to decode our own journeys, whether in business, leadership, or life itself. Just as God transformed Abram into Abraham and Saul into Paul, so too can we transform ourselves, not by changing our essence, but by aligning with our divine purpose. Now, the question is, what name will you give yourself? What archetype will you embody? And what divine blueprint will you follow? The codes of the Bible are not just stories. They are patterns, guides, maps for those who seek to uncover them. The power of perseverance and vision. One of the most enduring themes in the Bible is the test of endurance. Throughout Scripture, heroes are not celebrated for their brilliance or quick triumphs, but for their persistence, their ability to withstand trials, and their unwavering faith in the face of overwhelming challenges. The Covert codes embedded in these stories are not just about divine intervention, they are about human resilience and the strategies that help leaders navigate failure, setback, and the slow, painstaking journey toward greatness. Let's take the example of Job, whose story is often cited as a model of patience. But is it only patience that Job demonstrates? Or is there something deeper? Job, the archetype of endurance and faith. Job's story is one of unparalleled suffering. A wealthy and righteous man, he is suddenly struck with loss. His wealth is taken away. His health deteriorates, and his family is destroyed. He sits in the ashes, covered in sores, wondering why such calamity has befallen him. But through all of this, Job does not give up his faith. His story is about resilience under pressure. Job's endurance is not the passive, quiet suffering we often imagine. Rather, it is an active struggle, a dialogue with God, where Job questions, challenges, and pleads for answers. The Covert code here is the power of honest questioning in the face of adversity. Job's honesty with God, his refusal to hide his pain and his willingness to express his doubts, is ultimately what leads him to restoration. Job teaches us that in leadership, perseverance is not about blindly moving forward. It is about engaging with the difficult questions, allowing oneself to feel the weight of suffering, and then continuing to walk forward in faith. Leaders must, like Job, acknowledge pain but refuse to be defined by it. The power of divine strategy, the story of Esther. In contrast to Job's endurance, the story of Esther offers a powerful lesson in timing, strategy, and the courage to act in a moment of crisis. Esther, a Jewish woman who becomes queen in Persia, faces a situation where the entire Jewish population is at risk of annihilation. She could have remained silent, protected by her royal status, but instead, Esther confronts the king, risking her life to save her people. What is striking about Esther's story is not only her bravery, but the strategic way in which she navigates her circumstances. She does not immediately throw herself into the king's presence. Instead, she prepares herself and her people with fasting and prayer. She waits for the right moment, knowing that her actions must be deliberate and purposeful. Esther's story reveals a deeper code for leaders, the balance between bold action and strategic patience. Sometimes, the most effective way to lead is not through rashness or impulsive decisions, but through preparation, listening, and choosing the right moment to act. The leadership strategy of Solomon, wisdom beyond wealth. Solomon, as we explored earlier, is known for his wisdom, but the strategy hidden in his story goes beyond simply making wise decisions. It's about understanding the nuances of power, influence, and vision. Solomon's approach to leadership is rooted in his relationship with God. In 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 9, when God offers Solomon anything he desires, Solomon does not ask for wealth or long life, but for wisdom to govern the people of Israel. His wisdom, therefore, is not just for his personal gain, it is a tool for the greater good, a strategic asset for leading others effectively. This story reflects a key leadership lesson: wisdom must be used for service, not self-aggrandizement. True leaders are those who use their influence to empower others, and Solomon's wisdom was a vehicle for that empowerment. His rule was one of peace and prosperity because his actions were driven by a desire to build the community, not simply accumulate wealth or fame. Moreover, Solomon's construction of the Temple of God serves as a symbol of sacred vision. This wasn't just a political or architectural achievement, it was a manifestation of a spiritual strategy, a place where the presence of God could dwell and where people could come together in worship. The temple was the embodiment of Solomon's vision for a united, peaceful, and righteous kingdom. The code of growth, the parable of the mustard seed. Moving into the New Testament, the parable of the mustard seed provides another code of strategy hidden in the story of growth and development. In Matthew chapter 13 verses 31 to 32, Jesus describes the mustard seed as the smallest of seeds. Yet when planted, it grows into a tree that provides shelter for birds. This parable encapsulates the principle of exponential growth. How small, seemingly insignificant actions can lead to great transformations. The mustard seed represents the power of faith, but also the power of persistence and consistent effort. Over time, the small mustard seed grows into a tree that can provide shade and shelter. Just as a small idea or a humble beginning can grow into something significant. For entrepreneurs and leaders, this code teaches a crucial lesson: never underestimate the power of small beginnings. Patience, consistency, and vision are the keys to building something that lasts. Just as the mustard seed grows to shelter many, so too does the work we do in our businesses, communities, and relationships grow, often in ways we can't immediately see. Timing and persistence in the story of Nehemiah. Finally, the story of Nehemiah offers an incredible example of leadership through persistence, patience, and strategic action. When Nehemiah learns that the walls of Jerusalem are in ruins, he feels a deep call to action. But Nehemiah doesn't rush into the situation. He spends months praying, planning, and gathering resources before he even begins the task of rebuilding. And when he does begin, he faces immense opposition from external enemies and internal division among his people. However, Nehemiah doesn't give up. He keeps working, keeps praying, and encourages the people to persevere. His leadership teaches us that rebuilding takes time, but with vision, persistence, and faith, anything is possible. Nehemiah's story teaches a valuable business lesson: never underestimate the power of persistence. It's not the quickest or easiest path that leads to success, but the consistent, thoughtful efforts made day in and day out that ultimately build something sustainable. Conclusion: the strategy of endurance and leadership. In this section, we've uncovered several Covert codes from the Bible that reveal strategies for endurance, leadership, and vision. Whether it's Job's resilience, Esther's strategic patience, Solomon's wisdom, or Nehemiah's persistence, the Bible offers a wealth of wisdom for navigating challenges and leading with purpose. The Bible teaches us that leadership isn't about immediate success or fleeting glory. True leadership is about endurance, the ability to withstand adversity, and the wisdom to take deliberate, strategic actions that lead to long-term success. These hidden codes, embedded in stories, names, and archetypes, provide the blueprint for leaders who want to build legacies that last, businesses that thrive, and lives that reflect purpose and faith. The Covert codes of communication and building relationships. One of the most profound lessons embedded within the Bible is the art of communication and how it plays a pivotal role in leadership and relationships. The Bible is filled with dialogues, sermons, letters, and prayers, each carefully crafted to convey profound truths. But beneath the surface of these words, there exists a hidden code, a code about how leaders should communicate, how relationships should be built, and how one's self-awareness influences both personal and professional interactions. The power of dialogue, the story of Jesus and his disciples. The relationship between Jesus and his disciples offers a masterclass in communication. Unlike the typical image of a detached, unapproachable leader, Jesus engages his followers in dialogue, questions, and answers. He listens, he challenges, and he teaches with the intent of deepening the self-awareness of his disciples. One of the most powerful aspects of Jesus' communication is his ability to ask the right questions at the right time. In Matthew chapter 16 verse 15, he asks Peter, "Who do you say I am?" This question goes beyond simple information gathering. It's a way of prompting self-reflection. Jesus is not just asking Peter for an answer, he's asking Peter to look inward, to understand his own perception of Jesus and, by extension, his own faith. Through his dialogue with his disciples, Jesus models active listening and engagement. He doesn't just speak at them, he invites them into a mutual exchange. For leaders, this is an essential lesson. True leadership requires listening as much as it requires speaking. The act of listening deeply allows leaders to understand their followers, to empathize with their struggles, and to respond with wisdom and compassion. Furthermore, Jesus' questions are not merely rhetorical, they provoke growth and self-awareness. He doesn't simply give his disciples all the answers, he prompts them to search for the truth themselves, empowering them to become leaders in their own right. The code of reflection, the story of King David. King David provides another example of a leader who, despite his tremendous power, demonstrates self-awareness and humility in his communication. When the prophet Nathan confronts David over his sin with Bathsheba, David does not react defensively or dismissively. Instead, he listens, reflects, and acknowledges his wrongdoings. In 2 Samuel chapter 12 verse 13, David confesses, "I have sinned against the Lord." This moment of self-awareness is key. David recognizes his flaws and takes responsibility for his actions. In doing so, he exemplifies a crucial trait for any leader, the ability to accept criticism and learn from mistakes. David's leadership is not based on perfection, but on his willingness to learn and grow. His self-awareness becomes the foundation of his leadership, and it's this very humility that allows him to be restored after his mistakes. For leaders in business or any sphere of life, self-awareness is a vital trait. Acknowledging mistakes and taking responsibility for them not only strengthens credibility but also fosters a culture of growth and improvement. Effective communication in leadership, the story of Paul. The Apostle Paul offers an incredible example of strategic communication in his letters to the early Christian communities. Paul's letters, such as the epistles to the Romans, the Corinthians, and the Ephesians, are more than just theological musings. They are strategically crafted messages designed to address specific challenges within the churches and provide practical guidance for living a righteous life. Paul's communication is clear, direct, and focused on addressing the needs of his audience. But what's most powerful about Paul's letters is his understanding of context. He doesn't deliver a generic message. Instead, he adapts his approach depending on the specific issues facing the church in question. For example, in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, Paul speaks of love as the greatest of all virtues, but his message is deeply contextual. He addresses the church's struggles with divisions, spiritual pride, and competition, and his message of love is tailored to address these very issues. The Covert code here is the power of context in communication. Paul doesn't give a one-size-fits-all answer. Instead, he adjusts his messages to meet the unique needs of his audience. This is an important lesson for leaders. Effective communication requires an understanding of the context in which it occurs. Leaders must communicate not only with clarity but also with empathy, ensuring their messages resonate with the specific needs of the people they lead. Building relationships, the story of Ruth and Naomi. The story of Ruth and Naomi exemplifies the deep connection that can be formed through mutual respect, empathy, and sacrificial love. Ruth, a foreigner, chooses to stay with her mother-in-law, Naomi, after the death of her husband. Despite being in a foreign land, Ruth's devotion to Naomi is unwavering. Ruth's famous declaration in Ruth chapter 1 verse 16, "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay," reflects a commitment to relationship that transcends culture, ethnicity, and circumstances. Ruth chooses to serve Naomi not out of obligation but out of love and respect. In doing so, she becomes an essential part of Naomi's life and ultimately plays a pivotal role in the redemption of Naomi's family line. In leadership, Ruth's story teaches the power of relationship building. The foundation of leadership is not just about giving orders but about building authentic relationships with those you lead. Ruth's commitment to Naomi exemplifies the importance of loyalty, respect, and care for others. Ruth doesn't just serve Naomi out of duty, she serves her out of love. And in doing so, she becomes a catalyst for a great redemption story. Self-awareness and effective leadership. Self-awareness is often considered the cornerstone of emotional intelligence, and it plays a critical role in the effectiveness of any leader. It is the ability to recognize one's emotions, understand their impact on others, and use this awareness to foster better relationships. One of the greatest codes hidden in the Bible is the idea that great leaders are those who understand themselves deeply. From King David's recognition of his flaws to the Apostle Paul's understanding of his calling and context, these figures exemplify a core truth: effective leadership begins with self-awareness. In business, this translates to knowing your strengths and weaknesses, being honest with yourself, and understanding how your actions and words impact your team. Leaders who are self-aware can make better decisions, form stronger relationships, and create environments of trust and respect. Conclusion: the code of communication, relationships, and leadership. The Covert codes embedded in the Bible regarding communication and relationships provide a roadmap for effective leadership. Whether it's the dialogue between Jesus and his disciples, the self-reflection of King David, the strategic communication of Paul, or the sacrificial love demonstrated by Ruth, each story reveals a key principle: leadership is about building authentic relationships through effective communication and self-awareness. For leaders in any field, whether in business, politics, or personal life, these hidden codes offer timeless wisdom. They teach us that leadership isn't just about authority or success, it's about connection, growth, and empathy. Effective leaders are those who understand themselves, listen to others, and communicate in ways that inspire trust and foster unity. As we draw this exploration of the Covert codes within the Bible to a close, it's important to reflect on the profound and timeless truths that have been revealed through the stories of figures like Job, Esther, Solomon, David, and Jesus. These narratives are not merely historical accounts or moral tales, they are carefully woven blueprints for leadership, resilience, and strategic action in the face of adversity. The codes embedded within these stories offer not just religious guidance but also practical wisdom for living a life of purpose, direction, and impact. The timeless power of resilience and persistence. At the heart of many of these stories is the theme of resilience, the ability to endure through the hardest trials and to emerge stronger on the other side. Job is the archetype of suffering and endurance, his unwavering faith in the midst of loss offering a blueprint for leaders who must navigate challenges in their personal and professional lives. Esther's courage in risking her life to save her people teaches us about the power of strategic action and the importance of recognizing the right moments to act, even when the stakes seem insurmountable. Through these stories, we see that success is not born out of immediate triumphs but through persistence and faith in the face of adversity. In both business and life, success often doesn't come quickly or easily, but through the steady, deliberate efforts that are fueled by belief in a greater purpose. This is the hidden code within these biblical stories. Long-term success requires resilience, patience, and a willingness to keep moving forward when the world seems to be at its most chaotic. Leadership through self-awareness and humility. Another key lesson from the Bible is the importance of self-awareness in leadership. From David's acknowledgement of his own flaws to Jesus' compassionate dialogue with his disciples, the Bible teaches us that effective leadership is rooted in a deep understanding of oneself. Humility and the ability to learn from mistakes are central to becoming a truly impactful leader. In today's world, where leaders are often expected to have all the answers, the Bible's message is countercultural. Great leaders don't have all the answers, they know how to ask the right questions. engage in meaningful dialogue, and admit their mistakes. David's recognition of his wrongdoings after being confronted by the prophet Nathan is an example of how great leaders remain open to criticism, learn from their failures, and grow through self-reflection. True leadership, as seen in these biblical stories, involves not the pursuit of power or control, but the ability to lead through service, empathy, and personal growth. The Covert code here is that leadership is not about dominating others, but about empowering those around you. Self-awareness allows leaders to foster trust, inspire loyalty, and build relationships based on mutual respect. These are qualities that cannot be taught through textbooks or seminars, but through real-world experience and the willingness to grow as individuals. The power of relationships and communication. The Bible also emphasizes the power of relationships and effective communication in leadership. From Jesus' gentle but challenging questions to the sacrificial love shown by Ruth towards Naomi, the Bible reveals that leadership is fundamentally relational. Good leaders are not distant figures, but those who invest in meaningful connections with others, listen actively, and communicate with clarity and compassion. The story of Ruth and Naomi is particularly powerful because it illustrates the idea that true leadership is built on mutual care, loyalty, and a willingness to serve. Ruth's decision to stay with Naomi, despite the hardships they would face, speaks to the sacrificial nature of leadership. Similarly, Jesus' communication with his followers was not about instructing them from a place of authority alone, but about drawing them into a relationship, prompting them to reflect on their own faith and understanding. In the workplace, this principle translates into relationship building and clear, open communication. Leaders must not only provide direction but also take the time to understand the needs and concerns of their teams. Communication, when done correctly, builds trust and creates an environment where people feel heard, valued, and empowered to contribute their best work. The strategic vision for long-term success. At the core of the Bible's Covert codes lies the principle of vision, the ability to see beyond immediate circumstances and focus on a greater purpose. Whether it's Solomon's wisdom in building the temple or Nehemiah's persistence in rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, these stories emphasize that leadership requires long-term thinking. The Bible teaches us that success is not about achieving quick results, but about building a legacy that lasts. Nehemiah, for example, didn't rush into rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. He spent months in prayer and preparation, gathering resources and laying the groundwork for a sustainable solution. When he did finally act, his leadership was strategic, focused, and patient. This is a lesson for today's leaders, especially in the business world. Successful ventures take time. Building something meaningful requires vision, careful planning, and a willingness to work toward long-term goals, even when the immediate results are not apparent. The unveiling of the Covert codes, leadership, faith, and legacy. As we uncover these Covert codes within the Bible, it becomes clear that these principles are not just for religious leaders or ancient kings. They are timeless principles that can be applied to every area of life, from business to personal relationships, from education to community building. The Bible's Covert codes reveal that great leadership is not about power or control, but about service, resilience, self-awareness, and a long-term vision. The hidden codes of endurance, humility, communication, and strategic thinking offer valuable lessons for modern leaders seeking to build meaningful and sustainable legacies. At the end of the day, the Bible's Covert codes teach us that leadership is about faith, not just faith in God, but faith in the people around us, in the potential of our work, and in the transformative power of persistence. The hidden wisdom within these ancient texts is a blueprint for anyone seeking to lead with purpose, build a lasting legacy, and live a life that reflects true values and principles. Conclusion: a life transformed by the Covert codes. In closing, the journey through these Covert codes has illuminated not only the lives of the biblical figures we studied, but also our own potential as leaders in today's world. These stories are not confined to the pages of an ancient book. They offer living wisdom that can transform our personal and professional lives. As we apply the principles of resilience, self-awareness, relationship building, and long-term vision, we unlock the true potential of leadership, not as a position of authority, but as a calling to serve, empower, and inspire those around us. The Covert codes of the Bible are not merely hidden truths for the spiritually inclined. They are universal principles that transcend time and culture. By embracing them, we can all become the kind of leaders who leave an enduring impact, just as the heroes of the Bible have done for generations.